Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teens from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. Here we are with the Principles of Performance podcast. I'm your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my friend and co-host, Mike Perry. Mike, another one of your buddies we got today.
Yeah, we're bringing in the New England Dream Team here this week. We've had some Pats players, and now we've got a MMA legend and a good friend of mine, Joe Lauzon. I've been fortunate enough to work with Joe over the last few years and helped him with his last fight in Boston, and that went okay. So, but no, Joe's one of those guys that if you hear about mixed martial arts in New England, you're going to hear Joe's name. So I'm excited to pick his brain. I know Joe personally. Obviously, I've coached him, and it's been a lot of fun. But I'm excited for you all to get to know Joe a little bit.
Well, let's do something different. Let's change it up. Since Joe's your guy, why don't you do the intro and then kick it off with our first question?
All right, perfect. So Joe is an American mixed martial artist who fights out of the United States and competes in the lightweight division and is fourth all-time for bonuses. Is that still accurate, Joe?
I don't even know. I don't pay attention. I'm not sure.
I don't know. If you took a few more fights and trained with me, we'd bump that number up. But
it'd be close.
He's a legend. And if you've watched Joe fight, you'll understand why he's at the top of that list. So in addition to being a professional fighter, he owns and operates Lauzon MMA, located in Raynham, Massachusetts. And he's also got a beautiful family as well. So Joe, we are super pumped to have you.
Happy to be here. Glad to be involved.
All right. So we're going to get right in. So let's talk about growing up, right? What was it like growing up in the Lauzon household? Like, what sports did you play? What did you guys do?
So I I lived in Brockton, and then in like third grade, we moved from Brockton, which is kind of like definitely a city. My dad wanted to get us out of the city. So we moved to East Bridgewater, which is kind of like almost like a farm town. And, so I grew up we've been living in East Bridgewater for like a year. We got horses. Next thing you know, we got pigs and chickens and turkeys, and all kinds of stuff like that. So I definitely grew up playing in the woods, climbing up trees as high as we could and see who would be the bravest to jump from the highest point, fishing, playing backyard, football and backyard baseball and playing real baseball and playing street hockey and doing all that kind of stuff. But we'd spent all my weekends until I was probably 14 or 15, going to horse shows every single weekend, riding horses, all that kind of stuff. And then when I got to be 16, I found jiu-jitsu. I love jiu-jitsu. I fell in love with it. And everything else went on the back burner. I stopped doing the horse shows. I quit playing baseball. I played baseball up through high school, from T-ball all the way up through high school. And, but I was okay at it, but I was never good. But I liked playing it, but I fell in love with jiu-jitsu, and then I was all in from then on.
All right. So Mike has promised some funny stories here. So he tipped me off that there's a famous story of you and your brother fighting in the front yard. Let's start with that one.
So I was in the UFC, and I was 21, 22 when I was in the UFC, but just shortly before that, my brother Danny had been, he ended up being the youngest UFC fighter ever, but we're both very good, very, very well trained. This is a little bit before I was in the UFC. But so I am not a drinker. I've never drank in my life. Just family history, stuff like that. I just don't go near it. It'd be bad news. My brother is not exactly on the same page as me with that, right? So we're at this family pig roast we used to have, which is, basically we'd raise a couple pigs. We'd take one of the pigs, it'd be the pig roast pig. We would, cook the pig, invite all of our friends, it'd be basically a big neighborhood party. And so of course we have a jumpy house, and we're having jiu-jitsu matches, and we're doing tug of wars and all this other stuff. And at some point, my brother Danny was being a little bit of a wise ass, as he is at times. And his friend's like, "Oh, don't make us get your brother over here, kick your ass." And he's like, "I'll F him up, blah, blah, blah." He's a little drunk at this point. And so, he comes over, his friend is trying to get me to fight him in the backyard, in the front yard. And I'm like, "Nope, not doing it. Not going to get involved. Like, I understand how this goes. Like, I know I'll beat him the first time, and then he's going to want to go again and again and again. Like, I'm sober. He's not. Bad idea." And then he just won't let it go, won't let it go. And then so my dad comes over and kind of whispers in my ear. He's like, "Kick his ass." So now, like, if I got my dad like kind of egging me on a little bit, I have to do it, right? So, so I tell Danny, okay, like, we're gonna do this one time, that's it. And you can find this entire video; it's all on my YouTube, YouTube/Joe Lauzon, I think. And let's say we're doing one fight, that's it. I know how this goes. And he's like, "Okay, okay, okay." So we go there, and I catch him in a choke. I think I caught him in a triangle choke the first time. He wound back to punch me. And as he came down, I caught him in a triangle choke. So basically, I'm on my back, but I wrap my legs basically around his neck and around his arm, and I kind of strangle him by forcing his shoulder into his neck. And he's kind of stuck, and he taps or whatever. And then I let him go. And as I go to get up, he kind of pushes me a little bit. So we get back up, and I'm taking off my gloves. I'm like, "All right, we're done. That's it. That was the one time we're done." He's like, "Let's go again. Let's go again." I'm like, "We're done. We're not doing this. I know how this goes. This ends when someone gets hurt. That's the only way this ends." And then my dad comes over. He's like, "One more time." "All right, last time. We do this one more time. That's it." And so we do it again. Now this time, because the first time I choked him and I let him go, and now he pushed me a little bit as I was getting up, right? Kind of being a little bit of a punk, as he is sometimes. And so now we put the gloves back on. We go a second time, and this time I get him it's called a rear naked choke. It's like I get around behind him, my arm goes around his neck, grab on my own bicep. This hand goes on the back of his head, and I kind of like, it's almost like you're chopping the head off. You're forcing their neck into like this V of your arm and your bicep, and arm and bicep. And so I get him, and when you give up, you tap out, right? So you tap out. So he taps out, and I had to let him know who Big Brother is. I had to just kind of just drive the point home that I was a little bit better. And so he taps, and I give like an extra little squeeze, and then I let him go. Right. So it's like, it was probably like maybe a fraction of a second, 3/4 of a second, but it was long enough where he knew. And so I let him go. He spins. He tries to punch me in the face. Of course, like, I block, I get out of the way. He looks like the jerk because like I beat him, and now he's trying to sucker punch me after. Really, I was kind of being the punk in this situation, But yeah, good old family pig roast. And like, the best thing about this is like, there's all these, like, so we have video of it, and there's all these people like all circled around. No one is alarmed. No one is concerned.
Just like normal.
Just
like,
a normal thing.
pass the potato salad.
Yeah, there's nothing special about it. We're in literally my parents' front yard. So there's like a tree there, and there's like this big rock, and like people all sitting in chairs, like just like hanging out. My mom's there. Like, you just like see all these people, and like no one is surprised at all. So I think it's kind of a funny story. I don't think it's a typical family barbecue.
Certainly not. So, all right. So you start fighting at 16, you said, right? Start getting
Yep.
into jiu-jitsu. So now fast forward, you said you were in the UFC at 21?
22.
22. All right.
Yep.
So that's a pretty short span. So like, what's the specific point where you realize like you could make something out of this and you had a talent for it?
So even once I was in the UFC, like, I didn't really. So I have a computer science degree too. I went to Wentworth in Boston. When I was in high school, I was on payroll for the school because I was really good at computer stuff, and I was really good at kind of like, I kind of fit a hole that they needed, right? So for getting stuff done, they had like one person that did IT stuff. They had too much stuff for him to do, so I got on payroll at the school when I was like a junior, and the school would pay me, so I would go to like half the classes. Instead of having 8 periods of class, I would have like 4 periods of class and then 4 periods of working for the school. And so I did that, and they gave me credits, for stuff I was doing and stuff like that. So then I went to Wentworth in Boston for computer science, and the entire time I was training because I liked it. It was my thing. And then I was going to school, and I was fully intent on like, I'm just going to do computers. This is like a short-term thing. This is just kind of something fun to do. This is never going to amount to anything. And then I was winning locally. I was, and I wasn't getting paid a lot of money, but it basically, while I was in college, it almost like I worked for my dad. My dad has J&J Bait and Tackle in Brockton. It's a fishing store, like wholesaler retail store. And there's not a lot going on in the wintertime, but there's a lot of like bookkeeping and kind of like odds and ends stuff, like, figuring out stats. Before we had like Google Docs, right? So it was like, I would literally like total up, okay, we sold 7 boxes of serums this day and 8 this day and 100 this day. And I would total it up for like the week and then for the month and then for the year. So I would kind of doing busy work. My dad basically just helping me out, giving me money. So I would do that, and then I would fight, and I would make money. It wasn't a lot of money, but I might make like $500 this weekend and $1,000 this weekend, and kind of stuff like that. And so I was just doing that as kind of a part-time thing, just as a hobby. And I was going to school. I was finishing up school, and I always said that I was never going to quit my job. I was always going to keep my job, because fighting is not dependable. Fighting is not realistic. Fighting is not, it's not, you're never going to make enough money. There's not enough money there. Right. So it gets to the point where I get my first fight in the UFC, and I'm still working. I graduated school. Like, I skipped my graduation so I could train for this fight in the UFC. And I think I made like the contract for the fight. I fought Jens Pulver. It was UFC 63. It was 2006, September. And I made like 3,000 to show and 3,000 to win. So if I win, if everything goes great, I made $6,000. And it was like literally spent like months training for this, right? We spent like 4 months training for it. So to train for 4 months to make $6,000 is not the most lucrative thing. But then there's like, you make some money on sponsors, and I got a bonus and stuff like that. So when everything was said and done, I made closer to like 35 or 40 grand, for the weekend. And, going from $6,000 where it's like, or $3,000 to, 35 is pretty good. So at this point, I didn't really, I still didn't think it was going to be like a long-term thing, but it was like kind of nice making, $35,000 for, a weekend's worth of work. Like, I trained obviously, but I liked training. Training was kind of my hobby, and, flew out for the week to California for the fight and stuff like that. Made 35 grand, went back to my job on Monday. And it was like kind of just like a side gig kind of deal for me. And then they started talking right away, that they wanted me to go on The Ultimate Fighter. So they were doing season 5, The Ultimate Fighter. And the guy I had just knocked out, Jens Pulver, he was going to be a coach on the show. So they're telling me, oh, we want you to come do the show. We want you to do this, all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't really want to do this. I'm not the most interesting person. Like, but you should take my brother. My brother would be great for the show. And they wouldn't take him because he wasn't 21 yet. So, so they just kept pressing me. I tried to give the opportunity to my brother, but they weren't going to take him. So I talked to work. I'm like, hey, what do you guys think if I just like, I took a leave of absence for like, 2 months, and like go do the show, and I'll come back after. And they were okay with it. So it worked out. So I went into The Ultimate Fighter, went back to work, and then I fought on the finale. I wasn't in the finals, but I won 2 fights in the show, and then I lost one. So I still got to fight on the finale. And then I made another like $40,000. And like, now it's like I have a full-time job. So this is all just like extra money. I made like 35, 40 grand. I made another 35, 40 grand. Now I just got like just banking this money. I'm sitting on like $80,000. And like, I'm like fresh out of college. I have no idea what I'm gonna do with this stuff. I have like an apartment, but it's costing me like $500 a month. It's like, I have no expenses really. So I won my first fight in the UFC. I won on The Ultimate Fighter. I won on the finale. And then, so my coach on The Ultimate Fighter was BJ Penn. He lives in Hawaii. And I hit it off with him like great. And he had just started bjpenn.com. And at the time, it was kind of like, it was before YouTube, right? There was no, like, this is like pre-YouTube. So there wasn't really much video content. Or maybe YouTube was a thing, but nothing like it is now. And there was really no video content. But BJ Penn was putting out all kinds of video content of him training and running on the beaches and, hiking and all that sort of stuff. And now he's calling me out on his website, like, Lauzon, come out here and train, come out and train. And I'm like, what do I do? I have this guy who's been like, he's the reason I started training, kind of like started fighting. BJ Penn, who's like this like legend, like one of the best to ever do it, is now on his website calling me out specifically to move out to Hawaii. And I'm like, how do I pass this up? Like, how do I say no to this? I'm sitting on like 80 grand that I made for my 2 fights. So like, it's not a big deal if I don't work for a while. I have a bunch of money saved up. I talk to work, and I'm like, hey, like, you guys let me leave for 2 months, and that was cool. I'm like, what if you let me leave? Like, maybe let me leave, like, maybe forever, but maybe I come back in a couple months. What do you think? And they're like, if you want to take off for a little bit, we can't guarantee we'll definitely have a spot for you, but you've been great for us. And we would definitely, love to have a discussion about it when the time comes. I'm like, okay. So at that point, I up and I just moved to Hawaii. And I went there for like, stayed there for like 6 weeks the first time. And I came back for a couple weeks, month and a half, went back for like a couple weeks. I spent roughly like 6 months there, over the course of like a year. And I hit off with BJ Penn. Awesome. And then, at that point, like I was making more money fighting, and it just made more sense to not go back to my work right away. And I was always thinking like, oh, maybe I'll go back, but maybe not. But then it just, as enough time went by, I was making more and more money all the time. I was doing better. I just never went back. Now it would be hell to try to go back because like I'm so far behind. Computer stuff changes so fast. But that was kind of how it like that was kind of the progression of like I was that kid that like was saying, okay, I don't want to make fighting a full-time thing. I want this to just be a hobby. I don't want to have the stress. I don't have the pressure. And then it got to a point where I'm like, well, this is like kind of a really nice opportunity to go to Hawaii, and you should quit your job and you should go and do this and see how it goes. And if it goes good, I'll keep doing it. If it doesn't go good, I can come back to work, and it wasn't a big deal, but it's gone great. I've been really, really fortunate, really lucky the way everything kind of played out.
Love it. So Joe, your background in computers, right? A lot of computer science is problem solving, right? And
Yes.
a lot of jujitsu is physical and mental problem solving. Do you feel like sort of the mindset and your ability to problem solve both, obviously in a mental standpoint, but from a physical standpoint, do you feel like the similarities of problem solving have sort of enabled you to become a better fighter?
100%. Like I think that like so when I went to Wentworth, it kind of like so Wentworth is nice because they let everyone in and then they filter everyone out. I think my major started with like 300 and something kids, and I think we graduated like 35. Right, computer science. Like they let everyone come in, they put you in your program right away. So we were programming like right off the bat. We were doing a lot of like logic stuff. Like we were doing a lot of that stuff right after the first week. And it kind of like changed my brain a little bit, the kind of way like I think about things and organize things and conceptually and stuff like that. And jiu-jitsu wise, I was already going down that path a little bit. I was never trying to memorize, okay, we have this one specific thing and we do this and this and this and this. I was always like, okay, well, this thing is kind of like this thing, which is kind of like this thing. And like, it doesn't always flow like A, B, C, D, E. Sometimes it flows like E, D, C, B, A. It goes like two directions, right? And I think it takes a lot of people like a long time to kind of make that connection and figure that out, and then like for their brain to think about it that way. But for me, it's like my brain was kind of on that train right off the bat. So I definitely think that, the computer science stuff helped me out. We have tons of people at my gym that are like engineers and doctors and like really, really smart people. And then trust me, we have a bunch of meatheads too. I'm not saying we don't. Like we have a bunch of, guys that are just, they don't care. They're not super logical like that. They just, they go and do this job or that job or whatever else. Like, and I love both guys, love both groups. But I think that jiu-jitsu in particular really favors people that are, analytical like that and like, big on concepts and that kind of stuff.
The one thing that the rise in popularity of MMA has done, and this is something I was thinking about when we were getting ready for the show, it has definitely made me think twice about getting in a physical altercation because you never know what you're going to come across. Like you're assuming I got this computer science kid, I'll kick his ass. And then like you realize this guy's a UFC, killer. And to say, I think about, I had a buddy of mine, you mentioned doctors. I had a friend of mine who's a very well-known, accomplished MD, told me how he like choked somebody out behind the library in med school. And
Yeah.
so like you don't know who you're going to mess with. So like talk a little bit about how, how the average guy who is going to think he's going to be tough and get in a bar fight doesn't realize like how sneaky, vicious that somebody could be if you don't, if you just try to size them up on an eye test.
Well, you don't know what you don't know, right? So like when I first started training jiu-jitsu, there weren't like tons of black belts popping around. Now I have like there's like 15 black belts in my gym alone. Right. But back then it was like a lot of schools were run by like, okay, this guy's like a blue belt. And it goes like you're a white belt. And then 2 years in, you're a blue belt. And then maybe 2 years later, you're a purple belt. 2 years later, you're a brown belt. 2 years later, a black belt. Right? It takes like roughly, 8 to 10 years to get a black belt. So we have tons of people at my gym now that have been trained 15, 20 years, more. But back then it was like, if you don't know anything, like a blue belt, it might as well be a god. If you don't know anything, a blue belt is a god. Like you have no idea what you don't know. It's like, and like a blue belt to me is like laughable sometimes, right? Because like I've been training so long now, like that blue belt is like, I'm not gonna, like, I know every trick you've learned. I know every trick you're ever gonna see. Like I've been training for, 23, 25 years. I'm not worried about anything you're gonna do. But to someone that doesn't know, they're a god. Like they just don't know what they don't know. So it's kind of the same thing when it comes down to fighting. Like there's like a really like funny Joe Rogan clip. It's always on Instagram Reels and stuff like that about how like, you know, you see this little dorky guy and you have no idea what you're getting into. You have no idea this guy, you know, what's going on. You know, like most people don't even know. I think they're getting.
And it's a picture. It's actually you're in the video too, which is funny, right? When he says that too.
Yeah.
It's literally like Lauzon. It's like it's a really cool video. Whoever narrated it and put it together did a really, really good job because it really narrates and tells the story about like you said, you don't know what you don't know.
Yep. You know, and if you see someone in a bar and you see they have like cauliflower ear and they have like a little crooked nose, or they got like a little bit of flat nose has been broken, or they got scars on their eyebrows, it's like that's the guy you want to avoid, right? That's the guy you don't really. But again, if you don't train, you don't know to look out for those things. You know, like I know to look out for those things. I've seen all those guys in my gym all the time. But if you don't know, you just think that you don't understand what's going on. Like, it's kind of like, you know, you guys talk a lot about like strength conditioning things, right? Like you guys know how to put together an actual program that makes sense, right? Whereas you get this guy that's you know a little bit of a meathead that he's seen, like he's watched a couple of YouTube videos and he's like, oh, I'm gonna do bench press and I'm gonna do squats and I'm gonna get so strong. And it's like those are parts of it, but there's a little bit more to it than doing like one or two exercises. You know what I mean? Like you know, as you know, from like a lifting perspective, I think the biggest difference for me is like it's all like all the movement prep stuff and all like the support kind of things. It's things that you do and you're like, this isn't going to make a difference, but then it makes all the difference. You don't realize it until you do it for a little while. And it's kind of the same thing when it comes to fighting. Like people think that like, oh, I can throw a punch, right? I used to fight in high school. I have fast hands, or I can take a punch, or blah blah. It's like you can take a punch with someone that doesn't know what's going on. Right? It's like if I crack you in the jaw, I guarantee you're going down. I don't care how big you are. I don't care how tough you are. If I hit you square in the jaw, right place, right time, you're going down. It doesn't matter. You know, and someone hits me right place, right time, I'm going down too. It's just that when someone's more skilled, the chances of that happening, you know, vary quite a bit. You know, someone hitting me clean, much harder. Me hitting someone else, you know, clean that doesn't train, pretty good chance. So that's kind of the thing there. I think that, you know, people are definitely a little overconfident in their ability to fight sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. There's a difference between being tough and being skilled, and I think a lot of people think they're the same thing.
Yeah, and like there's definitely like there's a little overlap sometimes. You know, like I've seen guys in the gym. I've seen some guys that are super tough, and then you know, but are not very technical.
That's me.
And then I've seen you're pretty technical. You've gotten better, but you were new in the beginning, right? You didn't know anything in the beginning. You were always tough from the start. But at the beginning,
tough is easy for me.
Yeah, it was easier, you know. But then there's guys that are like super technical, but are not the toughest. You know what I mean? Like they're technical, but as soon as you start like mashing a forearm on their face or something like that, they kind of fall apart and they want to, you know, go home. But and then when you get people that like it kind of lines up, right? You start with the guy that's kind of tough to start with, and then teach him some technique, and now you have something. Or you get someone that's super tough, you know, super technical, and then in the process of training, they become tougher. And then you have something that's much tougher, you know. But when those things come together, it's watch out. You have no idea, and you don't know what those people are gonna look like, right? Sometimes they look like super dorky, like I do, and then sometimes they just, you know, they look like a monster and they can't fight at all. You don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. Gustavo, one of our coaches, he moved out to California, and when I tell you he's the sweetest man alive, but at first glance he looks like a guy that you would see like in a villain in like a Marvel movie, right? Yeah. Like he's a very intimidating guy, and but he is the sweetest man on earth. So it's just funny, but you're absolutely absolutely
a monster on the mat.
So Joe, we were talking to Matt Chatham the other day, and Matt's, you know, he was a special teams guy from the Patriots, and he said one thing about professional athletes. He says you have to be a little bit crazy, right? You have to be a little bit crazy. And look, for you to be like in the top 5 all-time bonuses, like there's got to be a little craziness in there. Now, I know you fairly well, and I know about, you know, where that comes from as an athlete, but talk about like the ability to have that switch, because again, you're one of the most laid back dudes I know, but when you get in the cage, it's like it is a switch.
Yep. I mean, there's all these different, every single person's a little different. Everyone's personality is a teeny bit different, you know, and part of it's like just from genetics and upbringing, and some of it's, you know, experiences, stuff like that. There's so many different kind of ways it goes, right? And like we joke all the time about take like the autism spectrum, for example, right? We always joke that like you got to be a little bit autistic to be good at jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? Because like you have to be like super detail oriented. You have to be super into this. You have to like not want to be doing a lot of social stuff because that's going to keep you in the gym, right? If you're going out Friday, if you're the typical, college kid, right? You're going out Friday night drinking, you go out Saturday night drinking, you're probably going out Thursday night drinking. Like you're spending a lot of time like out doing all this other stuff. And then, you're doing all the normal, typical stuff everyone else is doing. And then you have me, I was getting 8 a.m. classes every single day, so that I would be done by like noontime, 1 o'clock. So I get a train, or I could drive home. So I could be home for jiu-jitsu to train from like 6 to 9:30, something like that. And then, take the train or drive home again, and then do my homework until 1 o'clock, and then get up, after 5-6 hours of sleep, and then whatever. And then the weekends is when I would catch up on all my work. Everyone else is going out partying, doing this, doing that. And I was like, being very, very, like lame, right? By college standards, not doing a whole lot. And, I think that like the toughness part, the intensity part of that, like I'm like, I have no problem. Like we talked about how I fought my brother in the backyard, right? Like I didn't feel bad about that at all. I was like kneeing him in the body and punching him in the face and like choking him, and like I didn't feel bad about that at all. And from a fighter perspective, some guys are like great in the gym, and then they do terrible on fight night, and some guys are terrible in the gym, but they really show up on fight night. Some people have both. Some people are, terrible both ways. Some people are good both ways. But, there's this like showing up, right? It's like that it factor, right? And I think I always just kind of had that it factor, right? I didn't get super nervous. I didn't like have like a super in-depth warm-up. I literally like for my entire, like my first couple UFC fights, all they did is they just kind of jump like this for a couple minutes. And then I would go like literally like a 30-second like bounce, call it the Lauzon bounce in my gym. I'd do like the Lauzon bounce for like 20 seconds, and I would go and I would fight, and all these other people doing like this long warm up and all this other stuff. And then there's me, I'd do like a 20-second, and then I try and rip someone's face off. And it's definitely like everyone's a little bit different. But for me, I always had that switch. Like from the very beginning, I had that switch, my very first amateur fight, I was literally like, I was supposed to fight earlier in the night, and then something happened with like the opponent for the main event. So I got matched up. The main event guy, this is like the Wild West back then. The main event guy, had no opponent. He sold a ton of tickets. So they asked me if I wanted to fight the main event guy. And I'm like, sure. And I had no idea. Like, and like at this point, it was like he was really the main event, not because he was the best in the million, because he sold the most tickets. Right. So he sold the most tickets. They lost that guy. So they had me like, so I'm literally sitting in like the second row for most of the night watching all the fights. And then like when like the fight before me is starting to walk out, I'm like, I know I don't need a lot of time to warm up. I'm like, I'm okay. When he starts walking out, I'm going to walk in the back room. I walk in the back room, and the fight was like a 7-second knockout. So literally, like, I don't even have my cup on. I don't have my shorts on yet. And they're like, all right, you're up. And I'm like, okay. And pull my shorts up, and go out, And for me, it was like, I shot like a terrible takedown. I hit with an uppercut, sat on my butt, like looking up at the guy. Guy lets me back up, and then I was able to take him down, and I leg locked him, and, and I won my fight. I won my first fight is at main event. And I don't think I really understood exactly what I was getting into, but that kind of set kind of the trend for me about like just like short warm up and just go, but everyone's a little different. But it doesn't matter to me. Like it doesn't matter if I'm punching like a person in the face or I'm punching the heavy bag. It's like, it's the same. It's the exact same. Like there's no, like, I know that person is doing his best to hurt me, so I'm going to do my best to hurt them. And it's not necessarily to like damage them and hurt them, but to win. If I have to break your face, I'm gonna break your face. If I have to rip your shoulder, I'm gonna rip your shoulder. Like I'm hoping you don't do it to me. But I know they're doing the exact same thing, right? They're training for the exact same, process, right? They're trying to hurt me and make me give up or have the ref stop it. So I'm gonna do the same to them. And I'm not gonna feel bad about it. I don't expect them to feel bad about it. I'm not gonna be upset that they did something to me, because I would have done it to them. And I think that some people, like, they have a hard time kind of getting on that page. And I think that some people are like, they're like a little bit too nice, or they just don't understand exactly what they're getting into. But for me, it was always like, just like, all right, here's where we're going. So just easy, I pick up this water bottle, I'm going to try and rip your shoulder off.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show, and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show. Let's dive a little deeper into the physical preparation, Joe. So you alluded to it a little bit earlier, the connection with strength and conditioning. And I'm not nearly in the MMA world like you and Mike are, but it always seems from the outside that it's not something that's really highly respected a lot with fighters, and maybe that's changing. And when they do, it seems like they gravitate more towards like a CrossFit type of just, kind of beat the shit out of yourself in the gym type of approach. Talk to me a little bit about how that mindset may be accurate or inaccurate, or how it's changed over time.
I would say that's very inaccurate now. I think maybe in the very beginning, like I think like maybe Rich Franklin was one of the first guys that was doing like, taking strength conditioning seriously. And he was doing like this like crazy circuit, right? It was like five or eight exercises. He'd go through it like, each one would take him like 5 minutes, right? So he's doing like a 5 minute circuit and he would do like 5 of these rounds. Like, and he was just like beating on his body super bad. And that was like that was like the very beginning. I think that CrossFit really, really tried to make like fighters train CrossFit, but I don't think any fighters were ever super serious about CrossFit. I'm sure there were some, but I don't ever think that CrossFit was like a big part of most fighters' routine. Because you can't. CrossFit's your sport, right? You're beating on your body so badly that you can't do CrossFit and beat yourself up like that, and then try to go and spar and do this other stuff, right? So I think that most of the more intelligent people have, So one of my coaches, my first strength and conditioning coach was Steve Bakari, and he used to always tell me that you need to walk out of the gym if you're a fighter. You need to walk out of the gym feeling better than you walked in, right? So like I'm not doing crazy deadlifts. I'm not doing anything crazy on my legs. I'm not doing anything, ridiculous. I need to walk out, feeling better. Now, there's definitely going to be times when like we're doing like glycolytic stuff when I want to strangle Mike because like I'm like falling over, I'm falling off the bike, I'm like laying on the ground, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like death. But I know that I'm in 10 minutes, I'm totally fine. But as far as like stressing like muscles and stuff like that, I think that that's kind of like a very old way of thinking about things. I think that all fighters now, pretty much all fighters now, I'd say not over 95% of fighters have a very serious strength conditioning routine, and they're not. I'd say most of them are not crushing their body to that extent. I think most of them are, they have like good, knowledgeable coaches. I think it's kind of past the point where most guys are like, oh, it's like, well, I have a brother that lifts weights all the time, so I'm going to have him be my coach. I think that most people are finding like more sports performance kind of coaches that are more serious, and it's much more intelligent now than it was, But back in like 2006, like almost, I don't think anyone was really doing it. I think it was more so like, we would train and we would fight, and like the best way to get in shape is for wrestling is to wrestle. So we'd wrestle a lot. We'd do a lot of jiu-jitsu and we'd spar a lot, and we'd, do punch outs on the heavy bag and stuff like that. But now I think it's totally different. I think it's, it's more not as much like attention and like personal care as like say like the Patriots are getting or someone like that that's making crazy, crazy money. Because we're making much, much less. But overall, I'd say it's more akin to what more professional athletes, baseball players, football players, Celtics. I think it's more similar to that.
So a couple follow-ups with that. One is you kind of alluded to some of the movement stuff, and you seem to have found a lot of value in that. Is there anything that stands out, that things that you found value in that you didn't expect, but has made a big difference in your ability to fight?
I mean, there's so many things that like I think that like from a fighting perspective, right? It's like you're not just your arms and your legs. It's really your core, right? So like all the stuff that has to do with core stuff, like whether it's like carrying big heavy sandbags or stuff like that. I think that's like if my core doesn't move, then my core kind of stays in place. It's held in place by, the rotationally by like my legs and my arms and things like that hanging on to someone. If my core doesn't move, it's very, very hard to get away from me, right? It's not necessarily like my arms pulling in or even my arms pressing out. It's more so like ability to kind of change angles. And I think they're doing a lot of the core stuff we do, whether it's like you said, like carrying big, heavy medicine ball slams and that kind of stuff. And the rotational stuff is really, really good for punching, but then also like not moving, with heavy sandbags and things like that, I think are huge. And that's like something like you wouldn't think like, oh, going to carry a sandbag, like what that's going to do for you, but like to me, that kind of stuff has like a bigger impact than like a bench press or something like that. Right. It's because there's very few times when like, if I'm getting good at bench pressing, I'm really getting good at bench pressing in that very strict same direction, that same motion every single time. Well, this is good that I spend all this time doing this, but as soon as I have to press up a little bit or press down a little bit, it's totally different. So like, I think that a lot of times, it's like, if you're getting good to bench press, if you're bent, you're a power lifter and you're trying to bench press and you're trying to get as strong as you can in this very particular motion, then that's really, really good. But the second you change the angle and stuff, it's like I think that definitely is not nearly as beneficial. But I think that all the core stuff is good regardless, right? It's because your core is always going to be strong, and you work on all these different angles, and you work on these different variations and things like that. And I think that it all kind of pulls everything together. But to me, it's like the core kind of stuff is what makes the biggest difference.
Okay, and then the second thing is you kind of alluded to it as well is kind of the load management of it and being able to appreciate how much time you're actually spending on the mat and drilling and the physical toll that that takes and how you manage that. And we had George Lockhart, who's an old friend of mine who I worked with years ago, talking about kind of how much emphasis is on recovery and how you have to really take an active approach to that. So talk a little bit about what kind of active stuff you're doing for recovery to help you bounce back from day to day.
I mean, I think that like, a lot of the movement prep stuff I think is part of the recovery, right? I think that like I love like sitting on a bike and just pedaling nice and slow. And I could be scrolling TikTok or Instagram or whatever, but just like kind of just getting like a very, very nice, like just going through the motions, just kind of greasing the groove. I think is really, really good. I think obviously like all of the, from a lifting perspective, I think that, like the medicine ball slams are good, whether it's overhead or side tosses or whatever you're going to do. I think that's all really good. I love pull-ups because I think it's just you get that good that the extension is good and pulling up I think is really, really good. And for me, it works out great for all the like I like a lot of butterfly guard, which is like a lot of like someone's like in my guard, so they're in front of me, but my hands are like almost like I'm doing like almost like a pull up on like through their armpits and the back of their shoulders, like pulling them down. So that kind of stuff, even even if we're not going super heavy with it, like that those motions make me feel really good. And for me, it's like from a lifting perspective, I think that if you could give me two things, give me a choice of either being super strong or never getting hurt, I would take never getting hurt every single time, right? And I think that really a lot of strength and conditioning is to keep us on the mat doing our sport more than it is to, it's like I was saying about like the pressing away. It's like I'm getting good at that one motion, but it's not necessarily going to be that's not going to be the motion that I need when it comes time to fight, right? But if I'm building up this muscle, it's kind of giving me more armor, it's giving me more protection. For when I do get out of position a little bit, I'm gonna handle things much, much better. There's tons of times when like we're doing takedowns or whatever. I think wrestling is probably the way we get hurt the most, right? It's like because I'm trying to get up to my feet, I'm trying to tackle someone, or I try and post on my arm, or I get my knee tweaked or whatever. Like there's a lot of ways we can kind of get hurt that way. And when I think about like lifting for the most part, it's almost like lifting is what's going to help my durability, right? It's like it makes me more durable because everything is like I'm getting better quality of a better quality of bulk. Like I'm not trying to just lift crazy heavy weights and just look really, really strong. I want to be as light as I can, right? Because I have a weight class I have to hit. It does me no good to go and gain 15 pounds of muscle, and now I got to lose that 15 pounds of muscle before my next fight. It's like it's all about like trying to like be as strong as you can and as light as you can. And I think that by tailoring your exercises to kind of focus more on like durability and that kind of stuff, I think just it helps a lot when it comes to longevity of fighters, because we're gonna the more we can stay on the mat, the more wrestling time and jiu-jitsu time and boxing time that I have, the better I'm gonna be. It doesn't help me to be like, oh, like, well, this week I had, I only spent 3 hours doing jiu-jitsu, but I spent 12 hours in the gym. Like that's not a good trade. I would rather be like 3 hours in the gym lifting and 12 hours of jiu-jitsu and wrestling and that other stuff.
Yeah. So, when we started working together, you started really tracking your sleep and
Yep.
using the Whoop and looking at
Yep.
recovery. And, that was a big part of it too, because you were starting to pay a lot more attention to your body and it gave you viable metrics to look at. But another big part of what we had to do when we were in camp was just week to week, see how your body was hanging out. Because I mean, every time you'd come in, I'd be like, all right, how's this? Because it really is having the ability to ask better questions. Because if I was just like, hey, how was the weekend? You're like, good, I'm sore. Well, we need a lot more specificity
Right.
with that, right? And with the course that we run at PPD with Eric and I, we always talk about asking better questions. And it's just like with you, if I was just like, hey, how was the weekend? And I didn't ask like, hey, like how's the knee holding up, or how's the shoulder or the elbow? And you just gave me kind of a very neutral blah answer, we could have made some less than optimal decisions from a training standpoint. So, I think the communication aspect is super important when you're working with high level athletes, because there's so much going on.
Yep. And I think that part of it too is like there's kind of like the ego part of it too, right? Like I'm gonna complain like I'm a little fragile little pussy. Kind of honestly, like I need to, like when something's bothering me, I have to let you know, right? I can't be like, oh, it's like, well, my hip is sore, but it's not a big deal. It's fine. It's like maybe it's fine. Maybe it's not going to stop me from doing anything. But if there's something that's nagging me a little bit, I need to let you know so we don't make it worse. Right. And I think
100%.
that was like a big thing. Like it's, I feel like every time I was coming in, I had something that was going on because like I almost never feel 100% great. Like occasionally, oh, amazingly, I feel wonderful today. Or, but for the most part, something was always bothering me, So, so I think that, the communication part of it's really good. And then like I should have talked about sleep before. Sleep made the biggest difference on me. I started using the Whoop band and I have an Apple Watch. So I don't wear the Whoop all the time because like I feel like a dork having the Apple Watch and the Whoop on. I just whatever. But the Whoop was huge for me because it would give me a score, right? And it would tell me like, okay, like you had good recovery. If I know I had good recovery, I have to, suck it up and I got to push through. But I know if I had bad recovery, that's not the day to suck it up because it got way worse. So it was kind of nice that like it wasn't like just how I was feeling mentally and like how I was feeling like overall. I would say it was nice for me to have like a tangible thing. And I would text Mike all the time. Oh, recovery was like 96 tonight or last night, or I was like, oh, it was 72 or it was 65 or 45 or whatever it was. Yeah, making sleep a priority was like really important. When I was coming up with SOS, I would basically leave my house at like 4:30, 5 o'clock at the latest to be there from 6. So I was, so I had to get up really early. So it means I had to get to bed really early, right? So I'd be like literally putting my kids to bed. And then like my kids would be in bed at like 7 o'clock and I'm trying to get in bed for like 7:30. So I can get like my 7:30 to 3:30 so I can get my sleep and I can get up and I can be okay and then have a full day. And like sleep made a big, big difference for me for sure.
All right, Joe, we're going to switch gears a little bit. So, we know that you have Lauzon MMA and, for a while you were still fighting and running Lauzon MMA, right? And
Yep.
it's tough to basically serve two masters, if you will, right? And
Yep.
now that you're not as active as a fighter, talk about what it's been like transitioning from sort of a full-time active fighter into more of a full-time all-in 100% business owner with Lauzon MMA, because I know for a while you had to kind of balance both.
Yeah, I do very well in chaos a lot of times. So like I was very capable of running the gym decently well and training at the same time, right? But like obviously way better to not split my attention, right? But I was kind of like 50-50. I was kind of like maybe 60-40. 60% training and fighting and 40% gym. But maybe like 6 years ago I started getting more serious about the gym, right? Because I basically spent like 20 years or so, just trying to get really, really good at arm locks and boxing and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and all that stuff. And then after enough time went by, I'm like, I'm already really good at this stuff. And then there's all these people that are running like these Taekwondo schools and they're killing it. They're making so much money. They have like 10 schools. They have this, they have that. Like, what are they doing different than me? And it wasn't what they were teaching because I know that what I would do if you put me in a cage with those guys, I would take their lunch money. I would beat the crap out of them, no problem. Wouldn't even be worth my time to get ready for it. But they're obviously doing stuff that's way smarter than me on the business part of things, right? So I got really serious, and in the same way I kind of focused and I got like hyper fixated on like getting the best like jiu-jitsu and wrestling and stuff like that and searching out the best coaches. I started finding like business mentors and coaches for that about how to run the gym better. And the gym just makes way more money now than it ever did before. And a lot of it comes down to like, okay, in the beginning, it's like, okay, it's me doing a lot of stuff. But then it's like I do a task for a little while and then I basically train someone else to do the task and I move on to something new. Right. So like we kind of systemize everything we do at our gym. So like for the most part, I don't do everything the first time, but for the most part, anytime we do something new, I do it myself to begin with. And I do it for a while. I'll do it for 6 months or so. I'll really understand it. I'll kind of figure out what we're doing. And then I will basically train someone else from my staff to take over that part of what I was doing, and I will go on to other things. And but just having like systems in place has made a big, big difference for us. It's not like we didn't like for the longest time we didn't track our leads. We had the school for like 10 years. We didn't track leads. So if someone come in on the website, we'd call them one time, and then if they didn't sign up, they didn't come in. That was it. And they're gone. We'd sign up like 2-3 people in a month. And then, from calling leads or whatever, whereas now we sign up like close to 30 a month. And we're not like, we're spending more effort doing that stuff, but like, it's not that much more. And that just makes a big difference, for us, as I'm sure you deal with it a little bit too, Mike, but we definitely deal with it more, I think, is you have like a churn of members, right? So you have people that come in and people that go out, right? So it's like this month, okay, we signed up 30 members. Okay, that's good. Okay, but we lost 35. Okay, that's a negative month, right? Like the next month, maybe we get 30 new members, but we lost 20 members. So we're at positive 10. Like that's a much better month, right? And you want to have mostly positive months. Sometimes it works out where like maybe you're a little bit negative, but the new people that are paying more than the people that went out. So it kind of evens out a little bit. But like from a business perspective, like focusing on all that kind of stuff and just systemizing everything. And this is kind of where like my computer science brain kind of, helped out a lot more because I'm able to kind of like, I'll figure out like, for like scaling or this or that. I'm like, okay, like, well, if we want to do this, this, and this, we're going to do these three things. Okay. What's the best way to do it? What's the best use of time? What's the best way to, divide who's going to do it and when and schedule it. And, we have all kinds of stuff we use, like all kinds of software we use for the gym. We use Slack, we use Trello, we use Google Sheets and Google Docs, and we do mail merges, and we have like all these different things. We have Facebook groups, we have TikTok, Instagram, like we have all these different tools that we use. And I think that if I wasn't more tech savvy, I think it'd be much harder for me to kind of figure that all out. But that's kind of like how the computer science stuff has kind of helped out a little bit more and just trying to be a little bit more intelligent about how we do things, right? It's like, there's so many times like, oh, we do it this way. I'm like, well, why do we do it that way? Well, because we've always done it that way. Well, that's not the best reason to do it. It's worked, it's okay. But how do we like, maybe not completely change, but let's do it a little bit better. Let's try and tweak it a little bit. And that's just how we try to do. We always used to joke, not a joke, but we used to say at the gym is like always get better, like always in training and always get better. And we're kind of trying to apply the same thing from a business perspective too. I have way more help at the gym now than we used to have. It used to be that I had one guy, Andy, he did everything. He cleaned the gym, he made all the calls, he did everything. It's just the gym's grown. Now we got like 5 or 6 people that help out and do different things. But everyone's a little more specialized. Everyone's better at their job now.
So there's a lot that you said there, Joe, that resonates, especially for our audience and for in our world. I'm thinking of a bunch of stuff as you're saying it. And one, you mentioned baseball earlier. I work a lot with baseball players, and in the town that I'm in, it's not that big a space where I rent space out of. I think we have 12 baseball schools that have kind of opened up. And because what happens is everybody who's ever had a cup of coffee in college baseball finds, a rich dad they coach their kid and they open up a warehouse and put turf down and put netting up, and all of a sudden they're baseball experts. But they come and go like the wind because there's nothing behind it. And baseball guys are generally not really good business guys. And I'm imagining MMA is very similar to that, in that you get a little bit of success in MMA and it's like, oh, this is easy. Why am I giving all this money to the main guy? I'm going to open up my own place. And then you realize, holy shit, this is actually a real business.
Yeah. I mean, like, so I don't teach a lot of classes in my gym. I teach 3 classes. I teach Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 o'clock, 10 in the morning. And then I teach my kids class. My son Joey's in like it's our Vipers class. It's our 6 9-year-olds. So I teach from 5 to 5:45. So that's all I teach in the course of the week, right? So it's like, oh, I'm teaching for like 4.5 hours a week, and I'm there at the gym a lot more than that. But I spend a ton of time doing all the behind the scenes stuff of like scheduling this and organizing this and talking to people, and we do staff meetings and that kind of stuff. And like, yeah, for sure, it's like, I totally see what you're saying. Like, it's the same exact thing in mixed martial arts jiu-jitsu worlds, where people think that, oh, I'm good at jiu-jitsu, I'm better than that guy, I can go open up a gym here, I've beat that guy's student or whatever, like I'm gonna have these people come to me. And these schools, they don't understand like how to run a business. They don't understand like how to track anything. They don't understand what to track. They don't understand what's important. There's so many things that they just don't know to do. And I didn't know to do in the beginning, so I understand where they're coming from. But you have to kind of be more serious about like, what is actually going to make you the most money. Like I used to be, when I was training all the time, I was, super focused on like the best training environment, right? Because that was what was important to me. I was making a lot more money fighting than I was through the gym. So the gym was kind of paying for itself. It was never losing money. It was always making money, but it wasn't making a lot of money early on. But it gave me like the best training environment for me, right? I was just selfishly, I wanted the best training environment. So I wanted the best fighters. I wanted the best training partners. I want all that kind of stuff. And now as time has gone on, like that's not the important thing anymore, right? The important thing is like the members that can pay, because for fighters, they're all broke. None of them have money, right? They're chasing this dream of being the best fighter, which means they're not working their job. They're not going to school. They're not like advancing their stuff. Like it's like everything is kind of taking a backseat. They have all these opportunities to make money and improve their life and do these other things, and they're passing up on it to go and train and fight and stuff like that. And then like what happens is like if I focus on those guys, well then they go and they the wind changes and they up and they go to a different gym, and then you just never hear from them again. and that's just that's how it goes with fighters a lot of times. It's like if you're focused on the fighters, like that's not going to work for you. Like that is not like there are almost maybe kind of one hand the number of schools in the world that do well based on because of the fighters that are really affected by the fighters. But for the most part, it's like the moms and dads and kids and families.
Yeah, that's why Perry's always saying you don't get rich training fighters.
No, no,
It's
for
cool.
sure.
But you do it, no, and you do it because you love it. And honestly, when I was overseeing 40 fighters at once and it was bananas, I did it because I truly loved it, right? It was never something that I was like, hey, I can't wait to get rich off of this. It just, I knew that. Yeah, I was told by several people, including yourself,
Yeah,
dude,
I
don't do
told
this
you.
for the money. Like a lot of people said that. And it wasn't for that, clearly, because like you said, it's the sort of the regular people that actually pay the bills.
Yeah.
So Joe, so what do you got coming up in the future? What are you working on? What can we look forward from Joe Lauzon MMA? What do we got going here, bud?
I mean, basically, I've been trying to get the gym as like efficient as possible, right? So like, I do well at the gym, but I do spend like a lot of time like throughout the week, like doing different things. So I have been very focused on trying to like systematically like offload as much of my jobs to other people as I can, right? Because obviously, like I think the pitfall that a lot of people that have their own business run into is they end up like, oh, you're gonna work for yourself, you do this, and you end up being kind of a slave to all your employees and then your members, your clients, and all sort of stuff. So I've been trying to very systematically like offload and systemize things, to a deeper and deeper degree. I plan on all my stuff for our kids' lessons, for example. Like in August of this year, I'll have like December of next year planned out. Like I plan out the entire year. I know exactly, okay, on December 12th, with this class, we're gonna do this lesson, and here are the details we're gonna talk to them about, and kind of like so I've gotten really, really deep on like kind of the planning parts of that stuff. And now like I spent a lot of last year kind of getting that stuff like really, really dialed in. The last, quarter of the year, I spent like a lot of time doing that stuff. But now I can kind of take it and I kind of just like drop it in the next year, right? We'll make some adjustments, we'll make some tweaks, but I kind of have like the baseline there. So I've been really trying to get dialed in on that stuff. But then like I thought last year we're gonna try to open up a second gym because I really feel like from like a martial arts school perspective, kids are like the best, right? Because you can set up like a kids program. I can say, okay, all the kids are gonna come Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. This is gonna be their time, and we're gonna set them on like a set track, a set curriculum that they're gonna follow for the year. And with adults, you can't do that, right? Because we have 6 a.m. classes in my gym, we have 10 a.m. classes, 11 a.m. We have 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. We have weekend classes. Like I can't come up with a curriculum because every single student in my gym comes on a different schedule, right? Whereas like in college, okay, you're going to go to this class on Monday and Wednesday at this time, right? That's more like our kids. So I really think that like from a planning perspective, I think kids are the way we're going to go. So we tried to open up a second gym back last like summertime, and I think that the timing of it just didn't work out good. I thought we had a space for sure, and I think they just didn't they just didn't want us. I could just tell from the negotiation they did not want us. I don't know if they thought we were going to be a fight club, and I'm trying to tell them like, oh, it's going to be a kids martial arts school. And they just came super heavy on this, and like they were pushing back on that, and I thought we were gonna make a deal coming because they seemed like they came so over the top in the beginning. I'm like, all right, they're posturing a little bit, like they're not gonna actually be like this. This is just them posturing. And then we spent a lot of time talking to them back and forth, and like I just got to the point like this is not someone I want to work with. Like I don't want to be this. So like it kind of took a little bit of a backseat. So once that happened, I try to systemize and get everything really dialed in and really get everything buttoned up and tightened up. And we've kind of continued to do that. So I think that we'll probably try to get a second gym going this year. But if it doesn't happen, that's okay too. It's like I'm doing fine. It's just it's always like, okay, like if I can offload most of my day-to-day stuff, okay, well that's freeing up, bandwidth for me to do other stuff. So that other stuff should be trying to open up a second gym. And then all the systems we've created for the first gym will carry over to the second gym. So that's what we're kind of focused on that. And if it happens, it happens. If it's great. If it doesn't happen this year, then it's not the end of the world. But that's where we're making a push to get a second gym going this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm gonna squeeze one more, and only because, Mike, I don't know if you're thinking this as Joe's talking, is there's so many parallels to what you're saying, Joe, and to what we do and what we teach. One being, just because you're a great trainer or coach doesn't mean you're gonna be a great business owner. Me being case in point, I own my own facility for 12 years. I will put myself toe to toe against anybody in the world in terms of trainer or coach. I am a very, very mediocre at best business owner, right? So and there's not this there one doesn't equal success in the other. And the other thing is, we teach a course on programming, and we talk about the art and science of programming, and taking something that there's an art to it and trying to make it systemized and simple is something you're doing. It's a mixed martial arts. And the little bit that I've had exposure to that world is you realize how much of an art form it is. And so you've used the word system a ton of times. So how do you systemize an art?
So I mean, you gotta you basically think like it's hard. Like, so if you ask someone like, okay, like what's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu? You get a different answer from every single person. You ask, what's a purple belt, brown belt, black belt? Like, you get complete different answers from every single person, right? And you could have like 10 people that are super qualified, that are great at it, but they're all gonna have like different ideas. So that's where the art part of it kind of comes in, right? It's like what I think is a blue belt is different than what, Mike might think is a blue belt, or Gustavo or Jimmy Quinlan or anyone else, right? It's like everyone has kind of like a different point of view on that stuff, right? So for me, it's like when we try to come up with it, coming up with like a system for that kind of stuff is like that can be hard on its own, right? But you got to kind of think, okay, like what is important? How do I think it should be done? And then how do I like there's kind of like the end product, but okay, how do you get to that end product, right? It's like you're trying to get there, but like what are the steps you kind of took to get there, right? And I think that like when you dial it back and you start looking at that stuff, I think that kind of makes it a little bit easier for you. I'd say like here's a question I'm going to ask you. Okay, so you say you're a mediocre business guy, right? Why are you a mediocre business guy?
Because I wasn't good at delegating. I was very poor at delegating.
Okay,
Because
but why? Okay, why are you
because a lot of the
delegating?
times, and I'm sure you can, because I'm sure you can attest to this, is you give somebody something and if you're tight, like if Mike can tell you, like I am so anal and like type A that when I see somebody's not doing it up to the standard that I always hope it was, I'm like, I'll just do that myself. It'll get done quicker. When it's like, no, I have to let them fail a little bit so they can learn how to do it better next time. So I don't have to keep being the guy to do it. Because if I keep being the guy to do it, I'm trapped. I'm never getting out of that cycle.
Have you heard of Dan Martell? Have you done like the Buy Back Your Time book? Have you heard that? He's a
No,
book
but
guy.
it's getting added to the list today.
Okay, so Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time, right? And so he's got two things he does, right? He just talks about a feedback loop, which is basically like he does like the beginning. There's a bunch of things he does, right? But one of the things he talks about is like he does the beginning of a task, he does the end of a task, and other people do like the middle 80%, right? So he starts them, he gives them directions of what he wants. He lets them do the middle 80%, and then before it actually gets put in a use or whatever, he overviews like the last 10% and makes adjustments, and it kind of fills it all in, right? So that's one thing he talks about. Another thing he talks about is that someone else that does it 80% as well as you is 100% fucking awesome. That's his quote, right? It's like, so basically it's like yeah, you could do it. Maybe you do it better than they do, right? But if you can find someone that does it like decently well, but you don't have to do it, it's way better, because you could have 10 people that do it 80% as well as you. That's 800%. That's way better than 8 of you, right? You have 1 of you. That's the most you can have. So like Dan Martell was like a book, like, I didn't know, I did the audio book, and it wasn't that long. But the book is pretty short too. But it's awesome, but like, I would say like, if you're not good at business part of thing, if you're not good at delegating this or that, it's like, why are you not good at that? Right. Another thing in the Dan Martell book is they talk about making playbooks, right? So a playbook is basically like, there's 3 different ways you kind of, you have a task. It could be, everything has a playbook, right? It's like, hey, here's how we open the gym. Here's how we close the gym. And right, and the first version of opening the gym is, okay, you literally have someone follow you with a phone and say, okay, I go to this door, I unlock this, I put this flag out, I bring these signs out, I take a walk through the gym, I look for all the water bottles, I take a walk through the bathrooms, I check the toilet papers, I do all these different things, right? And then maybe that's it. You turn the lights on, you're good, right? But then you have that's first version is like an actual video version with someone like following you actually doing the task. Second version is, okay, it's like a checklist. Okay, it's like turn on all the lights, and it's detail. Like turn on all the lights. Here's the 3 lights. Check the bathroom and for this toilet paper and this toilet paper, and put this sign out. Make sure you have to do this. You have to update it. Whatever you have to do. So that's like the middle version, where it's like it's not as long as the video, but it's a pretty detailed checklist. And then the third version is someone that's done it a lot. Is, okay, you turn the lights, you put out the sign, right, and that's it. But that's just like one specific thing that you have, and you can get as detailed as you want. So you can make them do it as detailed as you want to do it as well as you. And that's for opening. You have another playbook that's like closing the gym. You have another thing for like, oh, here's how we market on Facebook for the month. Here's how we're going to write a blog every month. We're going to do this. And like basically every single task that you do, you have a playbook. And as you just basically offload that stuff. So you spend like maybe twice as much time making the playbook for it the first time. But then after that, you don't do it. We have like a playbook list that's like this long for my gym. And like, I don't do any of it. You know, like I help make the playbooks. I start the playbook. Someone else does most of it, making it. I check it off at the end. I'm like, okay, let's do this, or let's adjust this, or whatever. And it gets done. And like, it made a huge difference for me as far as like, from a business perspective, there's nothing better because you only have you have 24 hours in a day. There's no way you can spend 40 or 50 hours in a day doing something. But if you have a couple of people that will do it exactly the way you want, then you have infinite hours, you know?
That is gold, Joe.
I'm not doing it justice. I'm sure I screwed up a couple of things, but that's like the general idea. But it's Dan Martell, buy back your time. It is awesome. It was really, really good.
It's already added to my Audible wish list, and I'll have it by next week. I'm curious. Do they have a playbook that gets your partner and podcast co-host to reply to emails at any point?
No,
do they have one for that, or no?
They don't.
They
don't have one.
I'll buy that book.
You got to get him to set up a timer on his phone. Check emails every day at 11 o'clock or whatever time he has time.
As long as they get the pliers out of Eric's ass, we're good to go. So we're good to go. But it works. But it honestly, all joking aside, it delegating and finding someone with the opposing skill set is very, very good, because that's the only reason why my gym works, to be brutally honest with you, is because Mandy has the literally exact opposite skill set that I do. And it works perfectly. And I always tell people,
I wasn't going to call you out, but I think that Mandy's probably a bit more of the techie person. She's more of like the writing blogs and the organizing and that kind of stuff. You're the brains behind the actual training, and I think Mandy's the brains on all the business stuff.
I do more tech stuff, believe it or not. I actually do a lot of the tech stuff. I'm almost as good as the tech stuff as you, but not quite. So
not quite.
We're just about what there. I'm really good at unplugging it and plugging it back in. That seems to work most of the time. So I can show you that. But all right, Joe, thank you so much. And Eric, you want to close this out, bud?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, thank you
for your time. This has been absolutely awesome. And I love where we're able to see the parallels in our world and see that we're really not all that much different, except we don't get to punch people in the face as part of our job. So
a little different. You get to beat people up in other ways, grind them in the ground on the bike.
Well, we do that at our gym. We actually have lots of impromptu jiu-jitsu classes on the turf.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and want to thank you for listening. And this has been the Principles of Performance podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.